Perhaps the most unbelievable thing about Jennifer Aniston is not her fame, but the quiet truth that peace has never truly seemed to belong to her. Jennifer Aniston, the golden girl of Hollywood, is the woman who etched herself into the memory of millions through her unforgettable portrayal of Rachel Green in the legendary sitcom Friends. She was never just America's sweetheart. She became the emotional heartbeat of an entire generation, a symbol of beauty, grace, and quiet inner strength that made the world believe her life must surely have everything one could dream of. Yet behind that radiant spotlight lay a journey far more complicated, a life marked by scars that fame could never erase, marriages that ended in heartbreak and once shook all of Hollywood, a deeply personal and silent battle to become a mother that eventually faded into quiet acceptance, and the relentless weight of public scrutiny that never truly let go. And now, at 57, as the lights of Hollywood still shine on her name, one question continues to linger in the minds of many. If her life seemed to have everything, why has peace always remained just out of reach for Jennifer Aniston? And if Jennifer Aniston has ever made you laugh or helped you believe in the strength it takes to stand back up after life's hardest falls, consider leaving a heart for Jennifer Aniston, the woman who turned her own life into a story of resilience. The world would eventually know Jennifer Aniston as one of Hollywood's most recognizable and beloved stars, yet the strength behind that famous smile had been quietly forged long before the world ever noticed the battles she carried alone. Born Jennifer Joanna Aniston on February 11th, 1969, in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles, she entered a family already woven into the restless pulse of the entertainment world. Years before, audiences would fall in love with her as Rachel Green in the legendary series Friends. Jennifer was simply a watchful girl growing up in a home where performance filled the air, yet emotional certainty often felt fragile. Her father, John Aniston, a Greek-born television performer known for his commanding presence, and her mother, Nancy Dow, admired for her striking beauty and diverse European heritage, now surrounded their daughter with culture, ambition, and the rhythms of show business. Jennifer grew up with two half-brothers, John Malick from her mother's earlier marriage and Alex Aniston, born years later through her father's later relationship. Even her godfather, the celebrated television figure Telly Savalas, seemed to confirm that Hollywood was written deep into the family's story. Yet fame, Jennifer would later reflect, always felt strangely distant, like a bright light drifting across the sky. Everyone could see it shining, but it rarely warmed the quiet, uncertain place she once called home. The first deep break came when she was 9. Her parents' marriage collapsed, and one day, her father stepped away from their daily life for a long stretch. What remained afterward was not simply absence, but a silence that seemed to settle into the rooms of their home, the kind a child keeps listening to long after footsteps fade, still hoping the door might somehow open again. Years later, Jennifer would remember that quiet as the moment childhood certainty shifted. The realization that love, even inside a family, could vanish without warning. Life with her mother carried its own quiet pressures. Nancy Dow's beauty was widely admired, and she often urged her daughter toward strict standards of appearance. Comments about posture, weight, and how her hair should fall came frequently. They may have been intended as guidance, yet to a young girl still learning who she was, the words sometimes lingered with unexpected sharpness. Over time, they settled quietly beneath the surface, shaping the way Jennifer saw herself long before the world ever formed its own image of her. Despite the family's ties to Hollywood, comfort was never guaranteed. Money could be tight, and emotional warmth sometimes felt uncertain. In those moments, Jennifer discovered something powerful. Humor could soften a room. When people laughed, tension eased. Laughter became more than a gift. It became protection. She would later reflect that when a room was smiling, few people looked closely enough to notice the fragile places underneath. But one of the deepest wounds would arrive just as her own career was beginning to take shape. In 1996, her mother spoke publicly about Jennifer's private life on a tabloid talk show. The rupture deepened when Nancy later published the memoir From Mother and Daughter to Friends, now revealing intimate details of their relationship. For Jennifer, it felt as if something deeply personal had been pulled beneath unforgiving lights. The distance between mother and daughter stretched into a silence that lasted nearly 15 years. Looking back later, she would acknowledge that some fractures never fully disappear. They simply become part of the landscape a person learns to live within. Those early storms, a father's departure, relentless scrutiny at home, and the painful exposure of family wounds to the public, quietly forged a resilience few people could see. To millions of viewers, Jennifer Aniston would eventually appear as the woman with the effortless smile and warmth that defined Friends. Yet beneath that familiar brightness lives the memory of a young girl who learned very early that affection could be fragile, and that sometimes the strongest people are simply those who kept standing long after they realized they might have to stand alone. Long before Hollywood knew her name, acting was not ambition for Jennifer Aniston. It was the only place she ever felt safe. In the fragile corners of childhood, where scribbled notebooks and drifting daydreams offered brief pockets of calm when the air at home felt unsettled, she felt the quiet pull of storytelling. It had nothing to do with applause. It was simply a place where uncertainty softened and a young mind could breathe again. By 1975, at 6 years old, while other children filled their afternoons with playground laughter, Jennifer slipped into imagined lives where she could decide who she was and how long she could remain there. Acting was never merely escape. It was steadiness. At the Waldorf School, where creativity was nurtured rather than restrained, she stepped onto small classroom stages that felt, for a few moments, like solid ground. Even then, she sensed that stories could move between people in ways ordinary conversation could not. Years later, she would remember that instinct not as a dream, but as a quiet refuge she could return to whenever the world felt uncertain. Adolescence slowly transformed that refuge into discipline. At 14, she entered the demanding halls of Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York City, where talent alone rarely carried anyone far. Under acting coach Anthony Abison, she discovered that real performance demanded something uncomfortable: honesty. The rehearsal rooms were cramped, faintly scented with dust and paint, and every scene required a vulnerability most people spend their lives avoiding. Some evenings, riding the subway home after late rehearsals, Jennifer quietly replayed lines in her mind while the train rattled through dark tunnels beneath the city. In the reflection of the window, she sometimes studied her own face, wondering whether what she felt was determination or doubt. Years later, she would recall that time with surprising candor. More than success, she simply wanted proof that somewhere in the world there might be a place where she truly belonged. Early adulthood tested that fragile hope with quiet persistence. When she graduated in 1987, the industry did not welcome her. It measured her. Survival meant ordinary work. Telemarketing shifts beneath humming fluorescent lights, waitressing for customers who rarely looked up, peddling deliveries through impatient Manhattan traffic. One winter night, rain soaking through her jacket, she leaned her bicycle against a dark brick wall and lingered there for a moment before climbing the stairs to her apartment, granting herself a few seconds before stepping back into the silence, waiting inside. Each job bought only one thing: another audition. Small opportunities flickered and vanished, a brief role in Mac and Me, scattered commercials, and television projects that appeared hopeful before fading away. Between 1990 and 1994, a string of short-lived shows, Malloy, Ferris Bueller, Camp Cucamonga, The Edge, and Muddling Through, arrived and disappeared almost as quickly as they began. Auditions blurred together. Hope rose, collapsed, and rose again. By 25, she carried the quiet exhaustion of someone pushing against doors that refused to open, beginning to wonder whether the girl who once believed in stories had misunderstood what they promised. Then, one ordinary afternoon in Los Angeles, the rhythm of that struggle shifted almost too quietly to notice. At a gas station beneath the pale California sun, engines idling and traffic murmuring past, Jennifer crossed paths with Warren Littlefield, president of NBC Entertainment. It was the kind of moment most people would forget within minutes. Yet something in her quiet persistence caught his attention. Their conversation lasted only a moment, but before leaving, he offered a few simple words. "Don't stop yet." He suggested she audition for a new sitcom the network was developing. That series would eventually become Friends. Jennifer could not yet know the role waiting ahead would reshape television and carry her name around the world. And in that brief moment beside a fuel pump, what mattered was simpler than destiny. After years of uncertainty, someone had finally looked at her and seen possibility. And so, with nothing guaranteed and very little left to prove except to herself, she kept going, unaware that the next chapter of her life was about to change television forever. Some moments change a life so quietly that no one notices at first. Not the people in the room, not even the one living through them. Only later does the world look back and realize that something irreversible began there. When Jennifer Aniston walked into an audition at NBC in 1994, she believed she was simply reading for a supporting role named Monica. Instead, the producers sensed something harder to define, an instinctive blend of humor and vulnerability that made a character feel startlingly alive. The role shifted, and Rachel Green found the voice that would bring her to life. From her first appearance on Friends, audiences recognized something disarmingly human. Quick wit, warmth that felt unguarded, and flashes of sincerity that made millions feel as though a familiar friend had stepped into their living rooms. Over the next decade, the show grew far beyond television, becoming a cultural heartbeat echoing across continents. The long, winding story of Ross and Rachel turned into one of the most anticipated romances in TV history, and almost overnight, Jennifer became the face of romantic possibility for an entire generation. Yet while laughter filled studio audiences, another reality slowly formed beyond the lights. Headlines followed her everywhere. A haircut sparked global imitation. A dress became debate. The character who made her famous began to live beside her in ways few people could fully see. In later reflections, she would admit that the boundary sometimes felt unexpectedly fragile, as if Rachel had quietly followed her beyond the script. The world adored the character, and in time, it became difficult to tell where admiration for Rachel ended and expectations of Jennifer began. Fame, she discovered, carried its own paradox. The same light that illuminates a life can also make it nearly impossible to step outside its glow. The honors told a triumphant story: a Primetime Emmy Award, a Golden Globe Award, and a Screen Actors Guild Award. And by the final season, she and her co-stars were earning an unprecedented $1 million per episode, placing them among television's highest-paid performers. From the outside, it appeared to be pure success. But admiration often carries expectations that no statistic can measure. The world had fallen in love with Rachel, and that affection came with quiet pressure. Remain charming, remain radiant, remain the woman people believed they already knew. and Jennifer understood that gratitude did not mean standing still. In 2002, she surprised critics with The Good Girl, stepping away from glamour to portray a woman shaped by uncertainty and longing. A year later, Bruce Almighty proved she could thrive inside Hollywood's biggest productions. Role by role, she widened the space around her own name. The Breakup, 2006, blended heartbreak with humor. Marley and Me, 2008, drew more than $200 million worldwide and left theaters in tears. Horrible Bosses, 2011, revealed a fearless comedic edge, and We're the Millers, 2013, delivered another major hit. On paper, it looked like a continuous series of triumphs. Privately, it also required learning how to protect the parts of life that success could never fully claim. When she returned to television in 2019 with The Morning Show, the moment felt less like a comeback than a quiet act of ownership. Now, both star and executive producer, she helped shape a story about truth, power, and resilience within one of the most demanding industries in the world. The performance earned nominations from the Primetime Emmy Awards and Golden Globe Awards, but its deeper meaning lay elsewhere. It reflected the confidence of an artist who had spent decades learning how to remain herself within a culture eager to define her. Around the same time, she embraced new platforms, appearing in Dumplin' on Netflix and returning to familiar ground with Friends, the reunion on HBO Max in 2021. A moment that quietly connected generations who had grown up with the same 6 friends on screen. Through every reinvention, and Jennifer Aniston has remained one of Hollywood's most enduring figures, not by holding on to a single chapter of success, but by continuing to reshape the story that follows it. The young woman who once stepped into an audition room hoping for a role now moves through an industry she helped redefine. And after decades beneath cameras, applause, and endless headlines, one quiet truth still lingers. Somewhere beyond the characters, the expectations, and the fame itself, Jennifer has guarded a small part of her life that the spotlight has never quite managed to reach, and perhaps never truly will. In the late 1990s, when the success of Friends had lifted Jennifer Aniston into one of Hollywood's rarest tiers of fame, her life seemed to be entering a chapter brighter than any story she had ever played on screen. Film roles had already silenced critics who once dismissed her as just a sitcom star, and suddenly her face was everywhere. Magazine covers, movie posters, late-night interviews, her easy smile becoming a symbol of effortless charm. To millions, she was Rachel Green, the woman whose wit had slipped into living rooms across America. But in 1998, at the height of that momentum, something arrived that felt less scripted than any role. Love. Not the kind written for cameras, but the kind that begins quietly. Friends arranged a blind date, though in Hollywood, almost everyone already knew the 2 names involved. The man across the table that night was Brad Pitt, a leading man whose performances in Legends of the Fall and C7N had made him one of cinema's most magnetic figures. 2 stars at full brightness colliding in a city where such light often burns fast and disappears. Yet, that evening was disarmingly ordinary. No photographers waited outside, no handlers hovered nearby. Just conversation stretching long enough that the noise of Los Angeles faded somewhere beyond the walls. Years later, Jennifer would remember the feeling with a kind of quiet disbelief. How natural it seemed, as if for a moment the machinery of fame had simply stepped aside. Silence did not last once they stepped out together. Their public appearances sparked an immediate, electric reaction. Within weeks, tabloids were celebrating them as Hollywood's golden couple, their faces spreading across glossy magazine covers and supermarket aisles. Cameras followed everywhere, outside restaurants, at airports, along sidewalks where engines idled and long lenses waited from parked cars. To the public, they seemed almost mythic, two luminous careers moving in step, proof that fame and genuine affection might somehow coexist. By 1999, Brad Pitt's proposal had already pushed the frenzy into full spectacle. Photographers crowded outside their favorite haunts, while rumors of the wedding filled entertainment pages for months. Through it all, Jennifer Aniston appeared effortlessly radiant, hands finding Brad's on red carpets, laughter slipping easily into interviews whenever his name surfaced. In long-lens photographs taken from afar, then they sometimes looked less like movie stars than two people quietly protecting a fragile pocket of ordinary life while the world edged closer around them. For a time, their story seemed to be moving towards something almost mythic. On July 29, 2000, they married in Malibu. High walls shielded the ceremony from the chaos outside, but inside the evening unfolded with cinematic elegance. 200 guests beneath a California sky turning gold, flowers lining the pathways, candlelight flickering in the ocean breeze. When night fell, fireworks burst above the Pacific, mirroring the scale of the celebration below. Jennifer, in a beaded gown catching the glow of the lights, walked toward Brad with a look that softened even the most skeptical hearts. Grainy long-lens photographs soon leaked to the press, feeding the sense that Hollywood had produced its own modern fairy tale. Yet their partnership stretched beyond romance. Together, they launched Plan B Entertainment, determined to build something lasting through storytelling. Friends later said Jennifer seemed lighter in those years, as if the quiet vigilance she had carried since childhood had briefly eased. When she spoke about Brad, the words were simple but unmistakably warm, once describing him in a way that suggested she had found not only a husband, but someone who could navigate the strange gravity of fame beside her. For a time, everything appeared perfectly aligned: a career soaring, a marriage admired around the world, a future stretching wide ahead. Looking back, it's easy to see why their story captivated so many hearts. But it wasn't only beauty or celebrity, it was the feeling that two people who had already survived Hollywood's storms had discovered calm water together. And on certain Malibu afternoons, when the cameras were gone and the ocean wind was the only sound left, Jennifer Aniston seemed to stand exactly where the young girl she once was had always hoped to arrive, somewhere safe enough to believe she finally belonged. For a while, that belief held. And for a while, it seemed strong enough to outlast even the relentless gaze of the world watching. Not every love story the world celebrates is meant to survive the light. For Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt, the chapter millions believed would last forever began to fracture quietly beneath the most blinding spotlight Hollywood could cast. In 2000, at 31, she stood beneath a sky of Malibu fireworks, believing she was stepping into a future meant to last a lifetime. 5 years later, at 36, the light surrounding her burned very differently. No longer fireworks rising over the ocean, but the relentless glare of paparazzi flashes waiting beyond every gate and doorway. The first cracks were hairline, almost invisible, hidden beneath the golden veneer of two intertwined careers. Between red carpets and Plan B board meetings, between shared triumphs and the quiet pride of watching each other succeed, and something vital began slipping out of reach. The schedules that once felt like proof of ambition slowly hardened into a distance neither of them quite knew how to close. Weeks blurred into months, spent oceans apart, each swallowed by film sets and press tours, until intimacy became a rare and fragile visitor. We were like ships passing in the night, she would later reflect, waving from distant harbors we could never reach in time. For a long time, The distance growing between them remained invisible to the outside world. By early 2005, the whispers grew teeth. At first, they lingered as background noise in the endless hum of celebrity gossip. Then, they swelled into a roar that followed her into every room. Photos were dissected, a glance missed, a ring finger bare, separate arrivals at events they once entered hand in hand. And soon the headlines sharpened further. Speculation that Brad Pitt's on-screen chemistry with Angelina Jolie during Mr. and Mrs. Smith had crossed into reality. Nothing was confirmed, yet implication proved louder than fact. Before long, Jennifer realized she was no longer simply living her life. She was watching it rewritten in headlines. When their separation was announced in January 2005, it landed like a cultural shockwave. Fans mourned as if something personal had shattered. For her, it was the quiet dismantling of the life she once believed she would grow old inside. Outside her home, cars idled through the night while photographers waited for movement behind the gates. Camera shutters snapped like a mechanical pulse whenever she stepped into daylight. Even the smallest errands, groceries, need coffee, became corridors of lenses searching for proof of her collapse. It was unbelievably painful, she later admitted, her voice steady but heavy, and I don't know if anyone ever gets used to heartbreak being this public. Yet the deepest wound didn't come from the separation itself. It came from the story that followed. Rumors spread that she had chosen career over motherhood, that ambition had poisoned the marriage. For a woman whose body and choices had been dissected for decades, the accusation cut deeper than any headline. "I do, and I will," she said sharply, a flicker of fire betraying the hurt beneath. It was more than gossip. It questioned her womanhood, her capacity for love, the life she might still build. The nights were the hardest. Friends remember the stillness of the house when she returned home, rooms holding their silence like breath. The bed felt too wide. A single cup of coffee cooled slowly on the counter. Therapy became a lifeline where the noise of the outside world softened. Yoga steadied her breathing, one quiet inhale at a time. And the friends who had known her long before fame formed a quiet shield around her. On set, she sometimes arrived with eyes shadowed from sleepless nights, yet delivered performances so layered they felt almost raw. She didn't hide the pain, she refined it. Heartbreak became truth. Loss became craft. What the headlines turned into spectacle eventually became something far more intimate. For tabloids, the split between Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt was pure gold. For her, it was love examined beneath the harshest lights imaginable. The woman who stepped out of that chapter was not the same one who had walked down the Malibu aisle in 2000. She carried more caution now, but also a steadier certainty of who she was without anyone else's shadow. She no longer needed the world to believe in the fairy tale it once adored. Years later, she would speak of that time without bitterness, acknowledging that some chapters close even when millions expect them to last forever. "You can't hold on to anger," she said quietly. "It eats you alive. You have to forgive, even if you can't forget." These were no longer the words of America's sweetheart in her 20s. They belonged to a woman who had walked through fire and learned she could stand inside the ashes. For Jennifer Aniston, and the end of that marriage was more than heartbreak. It was a collision between love and the machinery of fame, between private grief and public hunger. And when the noise finally faded, what remained was not the fairy tale people once believed in, but something far quieter and harder. The knowledge that even after the world watches your story collapse, the story is still yours to finish. For years, the world believed Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt had found the one Hollywood fairy tale that might survive fame. Then, almost overnight, their marriage fractured. The legal papers were signed quietly, but the aftermath roared across headlines and television screens. Brad and Jen disappeared from the cultural imagination, replaced by a new fixation that seemed to ignite everywhere at once: Brangelina. The change felt abrupt, almost cinematic in its scale. Photographs changed, narratives changed, and suddenly, the man who had once stood at the center of Jennifer's private life was moving through a different story alongside Angelina Jolie. A story unfolding across continents, humanitarian missions, and glossy magazine covers that followed them everywhere. And as if the world had already chosen the next act before Jennifer herself had even finished absorbing the end of the last one. As the years moved forward, that new chapter became a spectacle, watched with relentless fascination. Each new milestone in Brad and Angelina's expanding family, biological children, international adoptions, humanitarian travels, was greeted with celebration and endless coverage. Yet, with every joyful headline came a quieter shadow that returned to Jennifer Aniston again and again. Every photograph of their growing household dragged her name back into the frame again and again. The comparisons appeared everywhere, sometimes subtle, sometimes brutally direct. Radiant family portraits celebrated across magazine covers, while her own life was quietly reduced to the lingering question of what was missing. In tabloids examined her existence with merciless attention. Was she expecting? Was there a hidden sign? Had she waited too long? Why did motherhood remain a question rather than a chapter already written? Headlines dissected photographs the way critics study paintings, searching for evidence in the curve of a dress, in the angle of a hand resting across her stomach. And somewhere inside that relentless speculation, something deeply human disappeared. That an entire life, rich with work, friendship, and hard-won resilience, had been flattened into a single question the world refused to stop asking. Years later, Jennifer would speak about that era with a calm that only arrives after a long season of noise. "I kept showing up for my life," she reflected once, her tone steady but unmistakably weary. But it felt as if the world kept score using only two markers, whether there was a ring on my finger or a child beside me. The end of her marriage had already been a private heartbreak. The commentary that followed turned that heartbreak into something that lingered in public view far longer than anyone could have prepared for. Still, endurance became its own quiet discipline. Piece by piece, she rebuilt the rhythm of her days. Work became both shelter and proving ground. She stepped beyond the familiar image of America's sweetheart, choosing roles that revealed sharper edges and deeper truths. In The Good Girl, she had already shown audiences a willingness to strip away glamour in search of something more honest. But the years that followed pushed that honesty further. Dull Cake placed her on screen without the polish Hollywood often demands, earning critical respect and revealing how lived pain can quietly reshape a performance. Later, through the morning show, she stepped into a character navigating betrayal, scrutiny, and the relentless machinery of public life. Territory she understood not as distant fiction, but as something intimately familiar. And somewhere inside those performances was the quiet evidence of a woman who had learned that admiration from the world can shine brightly. Yet it can also demand far more from a human heart than most people will ever see. Beyond the glare of cameras, the life the world imagined for Jennifer Aniston was steadied by quieter anchors. Fame could enlarge a face until it filled every screen, yet it could not replace the fragile foundations that held her days together. A fiercely loyal circle of friends, the grounding ritual of yoga, and the patient, often invisible work of therapy. None of these were passing comforts. They were the quiet architecture of survival. Breath by breath, pose by pose, session by session, she gathered the scattered edges of herself and began the deliberate work of mending them where no headline could reach. In 2016, after years of watching her life narrated by strangers, she reclaimed the page. Her essay, For the Record, cut through speculation that had followed her for more than a decade. A woman, she wrote in essence, does not require a partner or a child to be whole. The words did not ask for sympathy. They set a boundary. For once, the public encountered her voice directly rather than the echo of assumptions built around her name. In the interviews that followed, she spoke with a candor that unsettled the lingering myth of the untouched Hollywood sweetheart. She revealed that she had undergone IVF treatments. She admitted wishing someone had once urged her to freeze her eggs earlier, and she accepted with quiet composure that motherhood might not be the road her life would travel. She once recalled sitting in the stillness of a clinic waiting room, realizing how loudly the world speculated about choices it would never have to carry. Looking back on those years, she said she held no regrets, not because the road had been gentle, but because she would not allow expectations. She never chose to define the life she had built. What the public often mistook for resilience had first passed through fracture. Betrayal, loss, and the long seasons of being defined by what and by whom she no longer had might have undone someone else entirely. In truth, they left their marks, etched quietly in places the camera never reached. But the measure of Jennifer Aniston was never the illusion of remaining untouched. It revealed itself in the way she learned to move forward with those unseen fractures still in her hands, carrying them with humor, with grace, and with a sense of self that refused to disappear. The old narrative that once framed her as the woman left behind gradually lost its authority. What remained was someone who had risen again, steadier and clearer than before. She came to understand what many fairy tales rarely admit. A life is not handed to us fully written. It is shaped by the choices we keep making after the lights dim. Sometimes the bravest chapter is the one in which you quietly rescue yourself. Through years of headlines, private losses, and distant judgments whispered by strangers, Jennifer Aniston did not fade into the shadow of a love story that ended. She stepped forward as the author of her own endurance. Her story was never built on perfection. It was built on persistence. And that, more than any romance, more than any role, is why her story lingers long after the screen goes dark. Not every new beginning feels like hope at first. When Jennifer Aniston allowed herself to love again, this time with John Mayer, the world quietly wished her happiness, though she approached it with far more caution. Nearly 3 years had passed since her divorce from Brad Pitt, and by 39, she had learned the delicate balance of moving forward without exposing every fragile corner of her heart. She promised herself she would move carefully, this time, slower, steadier. Yet love has its own momentum. John was younger, a musician whose restless charm carried the unpredictable rhythm of the road. One night, he could lean across a dinner table and make her laugh until the tension left her shoulders. The next, she might lie awake, staring at a dark phone screen, wondering if the warmth she felt had been real or only momentary. And their lives met at a moment when she was still quietly repairing herself after wounds the world had watched unfold in public. At first, he felt like electricity returning to a life that had grown cautious, proof that excitement, surprise, and possibility hadn't disappeared. But sparks carry risk. His world moved quickly, planes lifting off before dawn, concerts in distant cities, after-parties that stretched into early morning hours. She had begun craving something different. Steadiness. The quiet certainty of knowing someone would still be there when morning arrived. He lived inside motion. What followed did not collapse in one dramatic moment. Instead, it dissolved slowly through the quiet erosion of trust. That uneasy feeling that even a carefully opened heart can still be left exposed. That later she would admit that the hardest realization was not the goodbye itself, but the sudden understanding that someone welcomed into your most private spaces can still choose to leave without turning back. Afterward, the silence inside her home carried a different weight. The kitchen felt strangely hollow. The bed seemed wider. Some nights she stood alone under the dim light above the stove, waiting for water to boil long past midnight. The low hum of the refrigerator filling the room, while the absence of footsteps echoed louder than sound itself. The years that followed were not empty. They were quietly transformative. By then, Jennifer had lived through 2 heartbreaks that shaped her in profoundly different ways. The first, her marriage to Brad Pitt, had unfolded beneath the relentless brightness of global attention. The second, that her separation from John Mayer in 2008 unfolded in private rooms where no cameras waited. One heartbreak was amplified by headlines, the other sharpened by silence. In 2011, at 42, she met Justin Theroux while working on the film Wanderlust. Something about him felt steady in a way she had not experienced in years, thoughtful, artistic, carrying a quiet humor that softened the room around him. This was not the blinding intensity of a Hollywood power couple or the restless spark of a touring musician. It was slower, warmer. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that a future might unfold gently rather than suddenly. 4 years later, in August 2015, they stood in the courtyard of their Bel Air home surrounded by close friends and exchanged vows. At 46, the moment carried the quiet gravity of a second chance she had once feared might never arrive. For a time, their life together moved with the calm rhythm she had hoped for. Sunday mornings with coffee and newspapers spread across the kitchen island, conversations stretching lazily into evening, laughter drifting down hallways like sunlight through open windows. In interviews, she spoke about Justin with warmth and ease, describing him not only as a partner, but as someone who grounded her. Friends noticed the difference too. Her posture lighter, her laughter lingering. Yet even the most stable ground can shift quietly beneath 2 people. Work gradually pulled them in different directions. Conversations shortened. Silences lasted longer than they once had. By 2017, the distance between them had grown in ways neither of them could fully explain. 2 years after their wedding, they announced their separation. There was no public spectacle this time, no scandal, no dramatic ending for headlines to dissect. Only the quiet recognition that love, even when genuine, cannot always keep 2 lives moving along the same path. She was 48 then, old enough to understand that healing eventually finds its way back, yet still young enough to feel the sting of beginning again. Those close to her remembered how gently she carried the disappointment, speaking of friendship and mutual respect, while the house itself seemed to absorb the absence. The music played lower. The laughter came less often. 3 great loves, 3 goodbyes. Each left a different mark. And together, they traced the outline of a life lived beneath extraordinary attention. Over time, Jennifer came to understand something many stories rarely admit. Love does not end in just one way. Sometimes it ends under the blinding glare of public fascination. Sometimes it fades quietly inside private rooms. And sometimes it simply drifts apart between 2 people who once believed they were walking in the same direction. Each ending reshapes the person who continues forward, and the strength to keep walking is often the quietest victory of all. Even after the loudest headlines faded and gossip drifted toward someone else's story, one quiet space in Jennifer Aniston's life never truly disappeared. It wasn't the simple silence of an empty room, but the heavier stillness of a place that had long been reserved for a small life. A life she once believed would arrive, yet ultimately never did. For years, one question seemed to follow her wherever her life went. Why didn't she have a child? Behind the speculation lived a quieter truth. The child she once imagined resting against her chest, but never held. In her mind, that child appeared through ordinary scenes, toys scattered across hardwood floors, a bright laugh breaking the calm of a slow Sunday morning, a small hand reaching for hers in a grocery aisle. She rarely gave those images words. When a life unfolds beneath relentless public scrutiny, certain hopes feel safer carried in silence. Yet the world kept asking. Cameras pushed closer, commentators speculated. Again and again, the same blunt question returned. Was she pregnant? As if a woman's worth could be determined solely by the curves of her figure. Away from the headlines, the reality was colder. Fluorescent clinic lights, examination rooms edged with antiseptic, conversations shrinking into numbers, hormone levels, egg counts, percentages quietly narrowing with time. She later said she had tried everything, though the phrase barely captures the discipline behind it. Injections lined along a bathroom counter, ice pressed against bruised skin, calendars quietly rearranged around cycles and waiting. Hope arrived cautiously, almost superstitiously. But then it faded the same way. Unchanged monitors, careful voices, a room suddenly too still. No heartbeat, no shift, only data. Looking back, she once admitted she wished someone had urged her earlier to preserve the possibility she believed would always remain. There was no bitterness in the reflection, only clarity. Some nights she lay awake imagining the life she had rehearsed in her mind, candlelight flickering across a birthday cake, a small voice calling from down the hall. On certain mornings, the silence felt heavy enough to touch. On others, she simply rose, reminding herself quietly that she was still here. The absence never shattered her life, but it changed its shape, forcing her to redefine what fullness could mean. When she finally spoke about it publicly, the moment arrived without drama. In 2016, at 47, she published For the Record, redirecting a narrative that had circled her for years. Her message was simple. A woman's life can be whole with or without a partner, with or without a child. Later, in an interview with Allure, she spoke openly about the IVF attempts, the exhaustion, and the emotional toll behind them. She had given the effort everything available to her. What remained afterward was not resentment, but perspective. Regret, she explained, in essence, would build nothing. Therapy helped her untangle emotions when they blurred together. Yoga steadied her breathing when thoughts spiraled. Friends who had known her before fame formed a circle that required no explanation. For years, the world tried to define her by what it believed was missing. It overlooked what endured: discipline, loyalty, humor, and the quiet resilience of someone willing to keep going without spectacle. The most formative chapters of her life were not written beneath wedding arches or nursery ceilings, but in quieter rooms where she chose, again and again, to stand up and continue. She never denied the grief, but she refused to let it become the final sentence. Instead, she folded it into the daily work of living. Because wholeness was never waiting at the end of a single milestone. It was something she built slowly, day by day, and that quiet construction has endured longer than every headline ever written about her. Today, at 57, Jennifer Aniston stands not only as one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, but also as a woman who has quietly built a life of remarkable stability, wealth, and self-awareness. Her estimated net worth is widely placed around $320 million, a fortune shaped by decades of television success, film roles, production work, endorsements, and enduring royalties from the iconic sitcom Friends. During the show's final seasons, she famously earned $1 million per episode, a groundbreaking salary that helped redefine television contracts, and the global syndication of the series still delivers millions annually to its stars. Over time, she expanded that wealth through producing projects such as The Morning Show, high-profile brand partnerships, and the launch of her hair care brand, Lola Vi, in creating a financial legacy that extends far beyond acting. In an industry known for short-lived fame, Aniston's fortune ultimately reflects something rarer: longevity, discipline, and the ability to evolve across generations of audiences. Much of that wealth has been carefully invested in real estate, forming one of the most tasteful celebrity property portfolios in Los Angeles. Her primary residence is a celebrated Bel Air estate, purchased for about $21 million, originally designed by renowned modernist architect A. Quincy Jones. Set on several acres overlooking the Pacific, the property is surrounded by mature trees, sculpted gardens, and expansive terraces that frame sweeping sunset views. Inside, the home reflects Aniston's preference for calm, minimalist elegance: warm woods, natural stone, and dramatic floor-to-ceiling glass walls that dissolve the boundary between interior spaces and the surrounding landscape. The residence includes multiple bedrooms and luxurious bathrooms, a chef's kitchen designed for intimate gatherings, a wine cellar, a private screening room, and a professional-level fitness studio. Outdoors, the estate unfolds like a secluded retreat: an infinity pool, meditation gardens, shaded lounge areas, and wide lawns where evenings often end quietly beneath California's golden light. Over the years, she has also owned notable homes in Beverly Hills and Montecito, including the famous mansion once shared with Brad Pitt, reflecting a long-standing passion for architecture, restoration, and design. Her lifestyle today remains luxurious, yet surprisingly grounded. As among the major assets she has been photographed driving are a Bentley Continental GT, a Range Rover, and a Porsche Cayenne, vehicles that reflect understated elegance rather than ostentatious display. Yet material comfort represents only one layer of her life. Aniston remains deeply active in Hollywood, serving not only as star but also as executive producer of The Morning Show, a project that has earned critical acclaim and major award nominations. Beyond the screen, she continues to invest in wellness ventures, creative collaborations, and entrepreneurial projects that allow her to shape stories as well as perform them. Personally, Aniston's daily life centers on balance, health, and self-care. Known for her disciplined fitness philosophy, she maintains a routine combining strength training, yoga, Pilates, and functional workouts several times a week. She often describes her nutrition through the 80-20 approach, focusing on whole foods, lean proteins, vegetables, and hydration while allowing occasional indulgence. The result is the vibrant appearance that has made Jennifer Aniston one of Hollywood's enduring beauty icons for more than 3 decades. Even now, she remains creatively active, continuing her acclaimed role and executive producer duties on The Morning Show while developing new film and television projects through her production company, Echo Films. Though she does not have children, she maintains deeply loyal relationships with friends and family and beloved rescue dogs that frequently appear in her social media posts. In recent years, she has also been quietly linked to wellness coach Jim Curtis, though she continues to keep her private life largely away from the spotlight. Some emotional echoes from the intense public scrutiny of her past, particularly the years when her marriage, divorce, and choices about motherhood were relentlessly debated, still linger at the edges of her story, reminders of the extraordinary pressure that once followed her everywhere. Over the years, she has supported numerous charitable causes, including St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and Stand Up to Cancer, contributing millions of dollars while quietly amplifying awareness for medical research and humanitarian aid. Ultimately, the story of Jennifer Aniston today is not simply about wealth, property, or celebrity. It is about resilience, reinvention, and perspective. From the cultural phenomenon of Friends to the thoughtful, mature performances she delivers today, she has continuously reshaped her career while remaining unmistakably authentic. Her homes, her work, and her lifestyle reveal a deeper truth. Success is not measured only by what someone accumulates, but by the peace and meaning they build around their lives. And perhaps that is the most compelling chapter of her journey. Long after the headlines fade and the spotlight shifts, what endures is character. Jennifer Aniston's story shows that fulfillment is not found in fame alone. It is forged through resilience, growth, and the courage to keep writing the next chapter. What part of her journey resonates most with you? The resilience, the reinvention, or the quiet strength behind the spotlight? Share your thoughts and join the conversation. Because in the end, the brightest legacy in Hollywood is not the spotlight itself. It is the strength to stand beyond it.